Добрый день. Позвольте мне
Good afternoon. Let me start our panel discussion, Children in the City, Global and Local Initiatives for a Child-Friendly Megacity. My name is Anna Siprikova. I'm the Program Manager, Streets for Kids Program and NACTO, and I'm also the co-author of the book for the Global Initiatives for Designing the Cities and Towns. And I'll be a moderator of this session. We have Mara Mincer with us. She's the co-founder, Program Director, Growing Up Boulder. Also, we have Marcus Grant, Editor-in-Chief, Cities and Health. Victoria Efimona, Psychophysiology, CEO, Child Neurology Clinic Prognosis, and Tatiana Slushko-Tsapinskaya, PR Director, Inteco, Dina Borna, Director, ZSD, Architects, Mayors of London, and Advocate. And we're supposed to have 7 minutes for each presentation, and then initiate the discussion. Why we are talking about kids? As the urban environment affects to a large extent the health of children, and from 0 to 5, the children's health is being shaped up, and it affects the conception, cognitive properties and qualities, and thus they are prepared for adulthood from 0 to 5. And we know how it all affects children, but we actually are in the midst of crisis. About 500 children every day are killed in an accident, and so our session is going to last for about an hour, and it's equivalent to 20 children's deaths. It's a whole class at school, and if we undertake proper measures, we could have avoided these particular cases. 93% of children inhale polluted air, which affects to a large extent the kids' health. And thus they are deprived of the future healthy growing and development. If they are in the midst of the extra noise, they also are impacted by that, and they are not moving to a large extent. They just draw a bicycle and that's it. And their physical activity is lowered, also being detrimental to their health. And we cannot change anything. We cannot make them less vulnerable. But what we can do is that we may change the environment. We may change the urban areas. So we may have access ways. We may have the public transportation more accessible, affordable, and safe. And today's session is going to be dedicated to those solutions, starting from some minor ones up to the major ones, and what kind of strategies we are guided by in order to make cities comfortable, safe, and livable. And now I would like to pass the floor to Mara Mincer and ask her. You are one of the few to start initiating the project for urban environment design, and how Growing Boulder Company is operating. What are the benefits of your program, and how the children view themselves in ideal city?
Great. Thank you so much, Anna. Thanks for having me here today at the Moscow Urban Forum. Let me go back one. So what I want to talk about today is why child-friendly cities lead to more sustainable and equitable cities for everyone, not just children. And as Anna said, I run a program called Growing Up Boulder, and I'm also an advisor to UNICEF USA's Child Friendly Cities initiative. So this is a map to help you locate where we are. We're in the United States, sort of towards the Middle West, and it's a city called Denver in Colorado near the Rocky Mountains. It's a university town. And Growing Up Boulder is the name of our initiative. We are what you call a child and youth-friendly city initiative, and our vision is to inspire communities around the US and the world to adopt a child-friendly city lens while planning and developing communities for all. And our mission is to empower young people with opportunities for inclusion, influence, and deliberation on local issues which affect their lives. So we were founded in 2009, and we're actually a partnership between the University of Colorado, our local school district, our city of Boulder, and then also with a number of partner organizations around us. We work with young people from ages 0 through 18, and yes, we even work with toddlers, and they're often mentored by undergraduate students. 50% of our young people are from historically marginalized backgrounds, and we believe that children who have less of a voice in all parts of their lives deserve to have their voices elevated, and that's why we make that commitment. As I mentioned, we work with 60 or more partners, both local through international, and we've engaged 6,500 kids locally and reached 2.5 million people globally through our TED Talks, our books, our other presentations. So we're based on the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is a treaty ratified by all countries in the UN except for the United States. And there are cities all over the world that take this treaty and operationalize it. They implement it to make it theirs. And you can see in that handprint there that there are 5 key principles that are outlined. Now, the one that we focus a lot on is the right to be heard. So we actually want to hear what those young people have to say to improve their communities. But you may be thinking, well, why should we even care what kids think? And especially if someone doesn't have their own children, why would they want to live in a child-friendly city initiative? And I want to answer that question. And I want to tell you all these photos are kids that we've worked with, though. This is a young woman. She's now 16, but we worked with her. Okay, well, kids are not just future citizens, they're current citizens. They have a right to be sharing their opinions as much as I do or as much as my grandmother does. A child-friendly city is a city that is friendly to all people. So if you have a smooth ramp that works for someone in a wheelchair, it also works for a parent pushing a stroller or a teenager on a skateboard. You know, when you take the end user into account, you create a better design and a design process. And this is an image from a park in Vienna that was designed with young women. What they did was they learned from the young women that they were afraid to use the sports courts because if they felt unsafe, there was only one exit and entrance and they couldn't get out. So what they did was they made 2 entrances and they widened them, and then it became equal in terms of users. It was both girls and boys using the space. Children design for all ages. We often work with elders as well as young children, and they have a lot of the same ideas, and they think about each other's needs. Kids ask for where are their grandparents going to sit? What are they going to do? Young people are more flexible and creative than adults. There's research that shows that as the brain develops, we become more fixed in our ways, and that makes sense. It helps us organize lots of information, but what it does is it shuts out new ideas, and we can look to our young people for creative ideas. And finally, everyone who's involved benefits from dialogue and compromise. These are 3 second-grade young women, all immigrant children, who were sharing their ideas with City Council, and it changed both the kids and the adults in the room. So the impact, why should we do this? Why does this matter? Let's look at the impact on a few different levels. Let's look at the individual child level. When we do measurements before and after of our projects, we ask the kids, do you feel like you have a voice in decisions which affect you? Inevitably, it changes dramatically. And not only do kids feel like they have a voice, they continue to stay involved and contribute to their communities. And these are 2 young ladies who are working on a child-friendly city map, the first in our nation. And I brought a few examples of it today for anyone who wants to see. It impacts the actual place, and this is the most obvious one. On the left-hand side is a child's vision for a treehouse and a nature-filled park. On the right, 6 years later, is that exact park built by the specifications that the kids required. Our city council said must have a treehouse per children's recommendations in their official language. ideas actually impact our policies. This was a policy document that was created with some of the input from kids and adults, and all those places highlighted in orange show you exactly where the kids' ideas influence the outcome. Our director of transportation would carry this in her portfolio to all of her meetings, stick it on the table and said, are we responding to the young people's requests to be able to bike to school? Are we responding? Finally, we're impacting the earth. Young people are creating ideas that are in alignment with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And so when we're including them at a young age and talking about this, we're creating healthier cities that kids understand and that actually lead to healthier cities for all of us. If anybody wants to learn how to do some of this, we do offer trainings on the techniques of how we come about this. And I want to thank you very much for your time.
Спасибо большое, Мара.
Thank you, Mara. A very inspiring story of yours. And I would like to put a question to Marcus. Marcus is going to be online with us. You've been an expert consultant for about 15 years of the WHO, dedicated to the health of the cities and towns. And you actually wrote about the comfortable environment in the urban areas for kids. And what are those factors to influence good conditions for children so that they may be developed in full, and what urban development projects are necessitated on that score? Thank you.
Thank you. In order to answer those questions, I'm going to share my screen and show a presentation of some projects I've been involved in. And the last presentation was fantastic, especially interesting. And I think you'll see how my presentation sort of builds on that. So I'll just share the screen here. So a bit of a background about me. I'm an urban designer and have worked in public health with the World Health Organization European network, worked with some of the Russian cities in that program, and more recently working with Geneva and with the UN Habitat. So I've called this a sort of public health deep dive into children's urban experiences, because I just wanted to show you a few projects. Whoops, I'm just trying to, a couple of projects that I've done where, again, sort of building on what the previous speaker said, we looked at children's voices, and we also looked at the voices of parents in bringing up under fives in a particular cultural community in Bristol. So there's three pieces to this. One, making the walk to school healthier with Belfast Healthy Cities, which is part of the WHO European Healthy City Network. Secondly, bringing up under fives for a cultural community in Bristol. And finally, some places to get other information. We've just launched a child-friendly cities special issue of Cities and Health, of which I'm the editor-in-chief. So looking at the Belfast project, and we did this a number of years ago, and this was all focusing on making that walk to school healthier in Belfast. And Belfast has for many years been a segregated, religiously segregated communities. And we worked in one Catholic school, in one Protestant school, and one school where both communities came together. I've called this supporting the voices of children about their own world, which really chimes with the previous speaker. So we worked with children initially, sensitizing them to what health was, other than going to the doctor when you're ill. That there's a bigger agenda for health. And you can see that little on the blackboard, they were putting crosses on the screen there on the bottom right about how they felt at that moment at school, very healthy, healthy or not so healthy. And we talked about what health could mean in different ways, what supported health and what detracted from health. And then we got onto their walk to school, and they talked about things that made them uncomfortable, or piles of rubbish, or dangerous on their ways to school. And then later on in the programme, working with modelling, as you can see, and there's some live modelling outside Belfast Town Hall. And then this culminated in presenting the findings to, there's the Mayor of Belfast, and planting a tree, and a children's charter, which the politicians took on, recognising that children should have a voice in their environments, in their play environments, in their everyday environments, walking to school and where they play after school. So this was a very effective way of sort of almost concentrating the voices of children into the political sphere, and really sort of making a proposal that the politicians couldn't turn down once you get the voices of children and their parents. The second project, which is very interesting, which was actually brought about by a paediatrician in Bristol, a very enlightened paediatrician. And there's a community, the Somali community, of immigrant, asylum-seeking community in social housing in Bristol. And as you can see, these are some of the women. We can't take photos of their faces for various cultural reasons, but this is they're out and about in some of their environment with the tower blocks around. And the paediatrician realised that the children who were coming to his surgery, in a doctor's surgery, he couldn't solve the problems in the surgery. He needed to go out into the environments in which the children were being brought up and living, and looking at what was blocking a sort of healthier parenting, if you like, in terms of food environments, physical activity, and the social environment for these children. And we gave voice to this community, a very difficult to hear community. The women need translators. They don't often get involved in the public sphere. And we had an exhibition, Our Neighbourhood, Our Stories, where they gave photographs and descriptions of issues in the local area. And this has led actually to some funding that was would have been allocated to maybe a more wealthy area, being directed towards this community in terms of improvements to local playgrounds. So again, giving that voice is so important. Children are not heard of, the migrant community is not heard of, the idea of parenting. And this was led by a paediatrician who leapt out of his surgery, sort of barefoot work out in the community. Fantastic. And finally, just to say that we've had a child-friendly City special issue of Cities and Health. I'm editor-in-chief of Cities and Health. You can find that whole with the special issue at that URL, that internet point. There's case studies in it, Playing Out, which is a sort of street play initiative started in Bristol, but now international. We describe that. There's more information about the Belfast study there. There's something called City Shorts, which is just what cities are doing. There's 3 articles about what cities are doing themselves. There's some commentary and debate, very interesting, sound walking with children. What noises do they hear in the city? What noises are challenging and stressful to them, and what noises are more calming? And finally, there's quite a number of more research articles, if you like, scholarly research articles there in the issue as well. So I'd sort of commend you, if you want to go deeper into this, into some of the evidence base, reclaiming spaces, greenways as safe routes to school in East Los Angeles, high-rise parenting, difficulties of parenting in high-rise blocks in Melbourne, and some other very interesting studies there. So really, that's just sort of a tour of Belfast Healthy Cities, what they've done, the cultural community in Bristol, and Child-Friendly Cities special issue of Cities and Health. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcus. Thank you for your very deep insight and resource.
Thank you. That's a great resource. So many interesting articles. I do advise everybody to go there and read it. As Mark said, there is an impact of the urban environment for the kids' health. So I'd like to pass over the mic to Tatiana and Victoria. We do have sad statistics. 80% of children do not move enough around. 40% of schoolboys, girls have problems with learning. And Emerge recently developed an innovative approach to designing playgrounds. So please tell us more about this project. so that these new areas and spaces that have been designed considering the physiology with more medical aspects considered, how can they help contribute to resolve this problem? Thank you, Anne. I represent the practical side of the issue. Thank you, colleagues, for this wonderful idea that was voiced. We've been building housing for the last 20 years. We built over 5 million square meters of housing. And in 2019, we've had the research of our audience, target audience, and we saw that 60% of our buyers are families with children, young children. So the figure is formidable. 1.5 kid per apartment. 1.5 kid per apartment is the average for our projects. So for one of our pilot projects called Green Garden, it is a green area with 80% of the footprint for greenery. So we decided not to just build playgrounds in this space, but also to improve the overall product by making this space something to develop the brain of the child, to develop the vestibular system of children. So we invited advisors, consultancies, so that we will use the principles of neurodynamics. They have been invented time ago. So that resulted in a practical methodology, the technique that could be used by everyone on how to plan your courtyard. Anyway, so that every facility there, sporting facility, will help to develop a certain cognitive function of a child. Oh, here, I'm supposed to be, changing the pages of my presentation, but right here, I will hand it over to Victoria. Just as Anna said, there are problems with the children learning in Russia. This is typical worldwide. The more advanced the country is, more problems and issues children have, both with physical development and cognitive development. So an interesting approach was developed here, very much unexpectedly. A developer, the architect, and a neurological clinic. They all came together. That was by Irina Korshunov, the marketing director of the Inteco developer company. So they all met and developed this comprehensive approach. So I represent the Prognosis clinic of St. Petersburg, rather big one. We started in 1988, and we have seen a lot of children with predicaments in learning. But I will be brief. Our technique is as follows. There's a model of a vestibular apparatus of any human being. We have those 5 bodies, 5 organs in the human head. They're all performing independently. And if you believe whether you are only feeling seasick in a car, no, it's not just that. The way the child learns to speak, read, and write, and effectively move, that all has to do with this vestibular apparatus of a human being. So it all has to do with this organ. So whatever you have on the playground for children is called to develop a certain portion of your vestibular system, like a good recipe for your kitchen. You take good ingredients and you make a good and delightful dish. Well, we didn't invent anything new. Well, we had to improve some existing equipment. So Irina suggested that we bring whatever we do inside in the clinic to bring it out in the open. So the children will be able to do it outdoors, to develop their vestibular system and their cognitive functions right next door to their home using the outdoor equipment. So in the existing catalogs, there is already enough necessary components, ingredients. The thing is to combine them properly. Like for toddlers on playgrounds, not enough equipment. By toddlers, I mean those just starting to walk. Nothing there. So we're inventing some options for small kids to master walking. So we invented this roller-equipped little hill, or the balls, suspended balls, which stimulate both the visual perception and the vestibular system. So there's a complex approach for designing a playground. So other developers will not have to invest additional means in order to turn their playgrounds into neurodynamic facility. Come and learn our methodology, our techniques, to see how the vestibular system works so that you can select the proper components for your playground. Please consider that every age has a preference for certain types of equipment to develop the sensory perception and the vestibular. The modern playgrounds have to compete with gadgets, with computer games. But it is exactly the vestibular feelings that every child likes. So have no doubts, this vestibular system definitely is linked to the cognitive system. Now, after lockdown, with children having spent several months at home without much movement, we have seen in our patients coming to our hospital, our clinic from all over the world, we have seen a deterioration in the cognitive capability. Good proof of playgrounds being available day to day with certain lockdown elements. Lockdowns could become a tool to develop the brain of a child. So the initiative by this Enteco company was right time, right place. Well, Tatiana has something. Just a few words. This project has a social dimension to it. We would like to make it our competitive advantage, but it's fully accessible. You will have a QR code in the end of presentation. It's not translated into English yet, but it will be. Here, we're approaching the end of discussion. Van Steckestade, the architect, built this in 1860s for the emperor's family, his children. So the principles are still the same. Nicholas I. At that time, it was only accessible by the royal family. Now this project will bring it closer to all the children. Thank you so much, Tatiana and Victoria. Nice presentation. So I thought that with the lockdown over, the grown-ups better train their vestibular system as well, using playgrounds like that. I have a toddler too. Yeah, we have a shortage of equipment like that. Well, parents sometimes want to join in these games, but there's no facility for the grown-ups to exercise, to move around. So the playground should be actually multi-age scaling. A question to Dina. So Dina, you had this bureau architects. You're also counselor to the London mayor for the city design, and London is right in the agenda of the kid-friendly cities. In the general plan, there's a concept of making London child-friendly, and generally this is one of the few sites to discuss safe and secure streets, safe public spaces, raising the independent mobility so that children could independently move around the city without grown-ups. Please tell us, what is the current status? What are the issues that you face? What are the challenges? And what are the recipes for the solutions? Do they manage to move freely within London?
Thank you for asking me to come to Moscow. It's an absolute pleasure. So we're a small practice in London, and I'm going to just explain to you a little bit about the policy background and also what we're doing as architects. This is our practice in East London. The way we work really is from a sort of grassroots perspective. We know the local area really well, and we know the sort of people that we can kind of effectively help push the child-friendly agenda. We have a very supportive local mayor and in London as well, and councillors who are on our side, so to speak. We've published quite a lot of research that you can find on our website, it's all free to download, which has been really helped develop our understanding of what is behind sort of child-friendly urban design. And that work has sort of led to us creating some sort of spatial principles. We want to make it very simple for designers and architects and developers to understand how they might be able to lay out developments to make them more child-friendly. Some of that work has come through hundreds of hours of observational research about where children are playing independently. And the 4 principles that we find quite simple to understand is that spaces need to be car-free. They need to be well connected to other spaces, so not cut off. They need to be really accessible from dwellings, so we need to have them right next to dwellings rather than crossing roads. And we need to have them sort of well overlooked. All of those in place really helps make a space well used. Our work has sort of led to lots of advice and involvement with the major policy documents in London. So the London Plan on the left, which has recently been published, but also, as you said, and Making London Child-Friendly, and the Housing Design Guide. These are all the policy documents that developers and architects are using. There is a sort of connection between all of those in terms of child-friendliness now, so it's all saying the same thing. And then at a local level, London is a population of 8-9 million. Each of the boroughs, 33 boroughs, have about 250,000 people living in them. These are two policy documents from the London Borough of Hackney and London Borough of Tower Hamlets. Both of them are kind of setting out more detail about child friendliness for their local areas. So these boroughs are quite central. We work on the border of both of them and have been really involved in developing both for Hackney and Tower Hamlets. So how do we do this in practice? I started the presentation talking about planning. With the first slide, talked about planning, policy, talked about participation and design. And these are all the sort of elements that are part of Making London Child-Friendly. And this is a development here in East London that we've been working on in Tower Hamlets. So that's the document that we need to adhere to, as well as the London Plan. This is 800 homes around a school with new businesses and shops. So it's a big piece of city. And we're working with we are architects, and we're working alongside the architectural team. I talked to you a moment ago about the principles about what makes a good space, and these are two sort of existing, and then the triangle is the under development, the proposed scheme, and the heat map where we rank according to those four principles shows that the new development will have a higher rating for child friendliness. So the red is the warmth in the heat map, which is what we're looking for. So this is a really simple way of showing how we're kind of thinking about the spaces around the area. What we do is, as well as thinking about the design and the layout, is we work with children and young people. So through our work, we've developed a toolkit which we can work on with older children from sort of 11 years up, which is sort of high school age. We can also do a sort of a simpler version for younger children. This website has all the information you need about how you could run the same sessions. It's all free to download. We have 5 sessions here, so you can see they're all laid out from the beginning of the inception of the project right through to sort of near to planning. And what we really do is we focus on lived experience. We need to learn and listen to young people about what it's like to live in their local area. We do this, as I said, with younger children as well, but these photographs show you the teenagers that we've been working with who all live in this neighbourhood, and they know it really well. Some of our work, most of it's been carried on this project through the pandemic, some of it online, but some of it outside in the local area. They're filling in survey forms, and they're using a traffic light system that we have developed, which is about their ranking of space according to whether it's green, amber or red. You can see a bit more about it on our website, but essentially it's a really easy way of thinking about space and time. Green space is a space you feel free to choose to do what you want to do in it, which is what anyone might want to do, and an amber space is somewhere where there might be some rules and regulations, and a red space, it's very restricted. Now, we talk a lot about these kind of simple concepts, and we run through to them creating a manifesto, which then the design team works towards, and these bottom photographs show us presenting the proposals back to them, and they are then critiquing them. And then on the final slide, this is their manifesto that they've created. And then this final slide here is an image that we made for them about one of the spaces that is going to be transformed. This is underneath the busy motorway that's next to their neighbourhood, where at the moment it's a really dark and dangerous space, and actually now we're opening it right up so that they can walk through to a park. And what was really interesting about this image was that we wouldn't have made this if it hadn't been for the input of the young people, because we started to realise that children, and particularly older children, are never really visible in images. We never really put the teenagers in the photographs. And once you start to put them in there, you start to think about what they might want to be doing. They also want to play, they want to climb, they want to be around the younger children, they want to go in the cafes. And actually they gave this space, which you might be able to see on the feedback on the right-hand side, really good scores. Good is green, or okay is yellow, and red is poor. So, you know, they really helped us to sort of shape this community and to make us really think again as architects and developers how we make spaces for them. So I think what I'll finish by saying is that our job is to both listen and learn, and to teach them how to get involved, but also to just advocate for them, talk about them, think about them in everything that we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina. I would like to thank all the speakers for very detailed, interesting, profound presentations. I'd like to note that almost every presentation had accessible toolkits so that they could be taken and implemented immediately. So there is vast experience available. How should we go about making the cities a little bit more friendly? Taking small steps, make them more kid-friendly. My question to everybody, and we'll go in reverse. I'll start with Dina. What were the challenges in implementing those concepts in your coordination with city administration, city authorities, so that before you build something and scale it up, you need the city authorities to be on your side? So what is your advice to the cities that are only thinking of implementing that? So what should be the first few steps to go around?
Do you mean from the top level, or for all of us? Well, I think that we've been thinking about it in these conversations today. I think it makes absolute sense to think about your whole population. And I think that once we all start thinking about children, it gives us the opportunity to think about a group who none of us are. None of us in positions of authority empower our children. And that immediately sets up a different dialogue. And I think that it makes us think in a much better way about cities for everyone. That might not have answered your question, but I think that it opens up conversations and allows us to think about the future. I think it's challenging for leaders to do that. I think they are usually politically thinking about their voters. And I think that's difficult because children don't vote. And so that's what makes it hard for local and regional leaders to think, why should I be doing this? But I think the answers are sort of there in all the outcomes. But for me, I always say, go back to your own childhood and the pleasures and the joys that you had, and would you want to deny those to any children today? And just, it's really about, it's a very deep down personal thing, and I think that's what I always appeal to, is your sense of yourself, and that I think works the best.
Thank you so much. Tatiana and Victoria, anything to add? How do you go about implementing approaches? In Moscow, indeed, we have a great number of playgrounds, which is a good gift. Not many cities can boast of that. Sometimes the quality is not up to the mark. But what can you do? How can you start this dialogue so these local requirements are fully met? How can we understand what is specifically needed to be done or changed in a district or neighborhood? Okay, so far I haven't seen any major challenges. We are now in a pilot project stage. We're in a development stage for some more projects. And then we now, at this stage, we understand that the cities do not have large free spaces. There are very compact areas. So if the need for scaling it up, we need to think that the new designs for the new housing neighborhoods, there should be different combinations of sporting tools, sporting equipment, so children will be interested in moving to the neighbor's yard And they will also develop their navigation techniques and skills. Also, in an administrative kind of way, that will be a way a step in the right direction. Marcus, I hope you can hear us. Question to you.
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear and following the discussion very well. Yeah, sort of building on something Dina touched on, the common experience of childhood. I mean, that brings people together. Everyone's been a child, even if you haven't got children at the moment or don't intend to have children. And what we found with the projects is that building a critical mass, really. You might start from the Healthy Cities coordinator or the paediatrician with the other example, but then he's saying, who else do I need here? And he's making an association with the local community that have the issue or the problem. Then he may be bringing in local politicians, bringing in someone who might have some funding, and sort of building an alliance around this childhood experience, and then releasing into that, if you like, the voices of children. And I think that's what everyone, in different ways, all the presentations have shown, how to release the voice of the child into that arena. And once you've got that arena of people who can do things, either politically or funding or have a technical expertise, the urbanists, the designers that are involved, everyone comes together then. So I think that critical mass and bringing an alliance for change seems very potent.
Thank you so much. And the same question goes to Mario. Mara, with regards to the fact that the United States haven't yet ratified the Convention on the Rights of Children. Nevertheless, you have got this initiative. It's developing, it's prospering. And how do you communicate with the city administration? How can you involve various departments who work isolatedly, autonomously, but they are necessitated so that to be a part of that project, so that children do not perceive the city as a fragment, but as something integral?
Good question. Well, from the very beginning, we had a director of planning who believed in this sort of work. However, the other departments didn't necessarily know what to make of this. It wasn't something they were jumping on board to hear from young people. But what happened was there were members of other departments and of the public who heard the kids actually share their ideas for what's called our comprehensive plan, which is a plan that lays out how is our community going to be in 5 or 10 years. The adults were so impressed by the creativity, by the thoughtfulness and the inclusiveness that the young people suggested, that they started coming to us and asking for our services, to the point that we cannot keep up with the number of requests that we get. I really think seeing is believing. So you start very small, you prove how impressive it is to have young people be part of the dialogue and how it actually opens up the dialogue. For sometimes you have issues that are very contentious, but when young people are involved, the adults are on better behavior, they're more open-minded, and it actually can move forward things that have been previously stuck. And we've seen that happen several times in our city.
Thank you so much. And I would like to put a question which has been already touched upon, that people were in a lockdown in the midst of pandemic. They couldn't walk anywhere, especially kids. And whenever we just free ourselves from COVID, what needs to be done next? As so far children do not have full access to the infrastructure. They are still online in their studies. Let's start from Dina. Maybe London has some good examples. You have open streets, free streets as a good project. Maybe there are some other cases to indicate, and maybe you have very interesting case studies for us to learn.
Yeah, so we have some interesting changes that have been made in London. As you said, we have low traffic neighbourhoods and which have been, closing off cars from cutting through neighbourhoods and keeping them on main roads. That there is contention around that because of the fact that the traffic numbers have risen under COVID, and so people are concerned about there being too much pollution on the main roads. We also have school streets, which are a really good idea, where outside schools we close off the street during before school and after school hours, and I think that makes a really big difference. So parents are encouraged not to drop their children off by car, and suddenly that space outside the school is transformed, and the things that come out of that experience are quite profound. So parents are chatting to each other and children are just playing on the street, and it really shows people that kind of need and ability to play will happen everywhere. So you don't have to take them to the park. It can just happen right there. And actually that great moment when you're surrounded by your friends and your parents are chatting with caregivers. So I think that the way in which these places become transformed, also play streets, which are slightly different, where we can close them off with volunteers. And we ran one in the centre of London just before COVID. Obviously, it's been very difficult to think about organising activities for lots of people, organised activities during the pandemic. So we were kind of waiting for things to get better next summer. I think there'll be lots more of these play streets. The one that we organised in the middle of London was to show what the area around the new Museum of London could look like. So suddenly the centre of London transformed by children playing and making a mess and getting water everywhere has really opened people's eyes to a completely different way of thinking about the city.
Thank you. My question goes to Victoria and Tatiana. Integra project. You are mostly focused on the yards with the minimal number of cars. And do you keep track as to what is going on in these areas, how citizens are being self-organized? Do you take these self-organization issues and communities into account in your design efforts? Yes, we have to know our neighbors, and you have to communicate with your neighbors. We offer another project. We are talking about children, and let's talk about the things and the trends which are really topical for us now. And in designing of residential areas, I think we have to be aware as to what is going on in terms of cognitive capacities of children. And we are all focused on the mental work of our children. And I've got quite a number of responses when I placed my methodology in the free access. And children started thinking the upbringing and development of their children, how vestibular function is tied up to certain areas, and so we place something into the internet space, and the city may find some way out if we get ourselves locked somewhere. We may even organize some activity with the help of neighbors, with the help of communities. If you have your backyard, which is a closed one, you may also somehow move and be active. Our project is really of great value to us. We designed not only the playgrounds, but we know how to develop some cognitive skills of our children. We sometimes have to think as to how we bring up our children and what we deprive them of. And our environment for children needs to be adequate and safe. Marcus, what about your projects? What about your reaction on the pandemic? And is there any interconnection between the pandemic and those areas where children used to stay before the pandemic, or these results are too premature?
There's certainly, I think, been quite a shift in terms of people realising what can be done particularly in streets, I'm talking about in terms of public space, public realm, because of, first we saw, certainly in the UK, a huge reduction in traffic. I mean, virtually no traffic. There was parked cars still, but they just no longer moved. And suddenly, what I saw was families cycling, that I didn't even know so many people had bicycles, or families had bikes. And suddenly, there were just, all the roads were populated by families out cycling. Well, that is absolutely amazing. Of course, now the traffic's back. Those bikes are in the sheds or only get taken by car to an approved cycling facility or cycling route in a forest. But I think people can see what could happen if the city was designed differently. So there's been a change in thinking. Now, whether that will come through into change of policies or not, we've yet to see. In terms of playing out, which I mentioned, I mean, Bristol used to be called the street party capital of whatever, England, Europe, I don't know. We had a lot of street parties, and the idea was that you could close the street for one day or only a year and have a party. Well, playing out worked with the council on making multiple street closures. So you could close the street one day a week after school. This is talking about primary schools, elementary schools, and with volunteers staffing it, and kids could play in the street. When I say close the street, I mean open it up for playing, for having cakes, having tea, for kids being out on bicycles with very low levels of car movement, with wardens at each end of the street for a certain number of hours, 3 or 4 hours, after school and into the evening, and repeatedly in the street again and again. And this has formed a lot of social networks and social bonding. Now, over COVID, that has decreased, that we can do that. But I know Playing Out and other initiatives internationally are sort of waiting to be bigger and better. People having seen this change in what we can use streets for. And I think people are demanding more community, more child-friendly space in their local streets, in their residential streets.
Thank you, Marcus. You gave a very brief comment, please. Did you organize some trainings amidst the pandemic, specifically for children?
Do you mean, did we work still with children?
No, I haven't been involved in that. The Playing Out group have been doing stuff on that. I personally haven't been involved in any of that during the pandemic. No, just sort of observing, really, the changes that have been happening. Although I know some streets have had socially distanced. They have been able to have socially distanced Playing Out days in their bubbles with marking actually on the street with paint. Communities just mark with paint themselves, the sort of 2 metre distances, and then families can come out and play in a safe space while other families are playing next to them. So that has happened in the pandemic.
Спасибо.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Получалось ли работать вот удаленно?
Did you manage to work at the online format in terms of training?
Yes. So we shifted very quickly in 1 week to figure out how do we still hear from young people and work with them during COVID times. So there were 2 things that we figured out. One, school went back to being online, and so what we did was we worked with the kids online. We would set up weekly sessions with the kids during school. It helped their teachers immensely. And the teachers said because the kids were working on real-world projects, it actually was what anchored them into their learning. It is what carried the kids through the pandemic and kept them engaged. And many of these kids are kids who don't traditionally do well in school. They said that this meaningful work is what propelled the kids forward in terms of their work. But the other thing is it forced us to take the kids outside and to really do the work outside, which is something that we're hoping to keep beyond just COVID times. So we've actually done a lot of work with our school district, which is the public school authority, to make sure that classrooms can be held outside beyond science and math, but also for English lessons, art, music. And we think they're going to stay out there and it's going to continue.
Спасибо большое. Хочу поблагодарить.
Thank you. I would like to thank everybody for your very informative discussion. Each presentation had QR codes, links. Please do not hesitate and look through these resources, read them through, and disseminate them. And we do not have to reinvent a wheel. And let's take what is available. All tools are available. They may be adjusted, accommodated, and modified. And we may start changing our cities, making them children-friendly, but also adult-friendly, starting from some minor steps. Thank you for your kind attention.